The explosion came without warning. One moment, Obergfreiter Klaus Weber was climbing down the concrete stairs into the bunker. And the next, the world turned into thunder and darkness. The blast wave threw him against the wall, and when he opened his eyes, his ears were ringing like church bells on Sunday morning. But this was no Sunday. This was the end of the world. "Is everyone alive?" The voice of Hauptsturmführer Heinrich Vogel cut through the dust and chaos. The SS officer's voice was sharp, commanding, as if the ceiling hadn't just collapsed behind them, sealing their fate. Klaus coughed, tasting concrete dust and blood. "I'm here, Herr Hauptsturmführer." Brenner? Schultz? Koch? Vogel called out the names like a teacher taking attendance in a classroom that was rapidly becoming a tomb. Here came the voice of Feldwebel Ernst Brenner, the oldest among them at 43. His voice was steady, calm. He'd survived the Eastern Front, Stalingrad, and countless other hells. This was just another Tuesday for him. "Present," muttered Private Hans Schultz, barely 18, his voice trembling. He'd been drafted 3 months ago, pulled from his mother's kitchen in Bavaria, and thrown into this meat grinder of a war. "Koch, answer me!" Vogel's voice rose with irritation. A groan came from the darkness. "My leg. I think it's broken." Klaus fumbled for his flashlight, his hands shaking. When the beam cut through the dust, he wished he hadn't looked. Gefreiter Stefan Koch was pinned under a fallen beam, his right leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood was pooling beneath him, dark and thick. "We need to move this beam," Klaus said, already moving toward Koch. "Wait." Vogel's hand shot out, grabbing Klaus by the shoulder. "First, we assess the situation. Brenner, check the radio. Schultz, inventory our supplies. Weber, check the exits." Klaus stared at the SS officer in disbelief. "But Koch is following orders, Weber. Or have you forgotten how the Wehrmacht operates?" Klaus swallowed his anger and turned toward the main entrance. Or rather, where the main entrance used to be. Now it was just a wall of rubble and twisted steel. He climbed over broken furniture and shattered concrete, his flashlight revealing nothing but devastation. The stairs they'd descended minutes ago were completely buried under tons of debris. "The main exit is blocked," Klaus reported, his voice hollow, completely sealed. "The emergency exit?" Vogel demanded. Klaus made his way to the far end of the bunker, past the rows of empty ammunition crates and abandoned equipment. The emergency exit was a narrow tunnel that led to a building 3 blocks away. At least, it was supposed to. When Klaus reached it, his heart sank. The tunnel entrance had collapsed inward, probably from the same artillery barrage that had sealed the main entrance. "Also blocked," Klaus called back. "We're trapped." The word hung in the air like poison gas. Trapped. In a concrete box, 20 meters underground, while the Red Army shelled Berlin into powder above their heads. "The radio?" Vogel turned to Brenner. The old sergeant was hunched over the radio equipment, his experienced hands moving over the controls with practiced efficiency. After a long moment, he looked up and shook his head. The antenna was on the surface, with the building collapsed. He didn't need to finish. "Then we dig ourselves out," Vogel said flatly. "We're German soldiers. We don't surrender, and we don't die like rats in a hole." "With what?" Brenner asked, his voice carrying a hint of the exhaustion they all felt. "Our bare hands? That's meters of concrete and steel up there. Then we use whatever we have, entrenching tools, bayonets, our fingernails if necessary." Klaus looked at Koch, whose face had gone pale. The man needed medical attention, not a speech about German determination. But Vogel wasn't interested in Koch's condition. The SS officer was pacing now, his boots clicking on the concrete floor, his mind already working on solutions that didn't exist. "Herr Hauptsturmführer," Klaus said carefully, "perhaps we should focus on keeping Koch alive first. Stop the bleeding. Stabilize his leg. Coke is a soldier. He'll endure. Vogel's eyes were cold, flat. Our priority is escape. The Fuhrer's bunker is only 6 blocks from here. If we can reach it, we can rejoin the defense. Brenner let out a bitter laugh. The Fuhrer's bunker? Sir, with respect, the Fuhrer is either dead or fled. Berlin is lost. The war is lost. The slap echoed through the bunker like a gunshot. Vogel's hand had moved so fast, Klaus barely saw it. Brenner's head snapped to the side, a red mark already blooming on his weathered cheek. But the old sergeant didn't flinch, didn't raise his hand to his face. He just stared at Vogel with those dead eyes that had seen too much. Defeatist talk will not be tolerated, Vogel said, his voice dangerously quiet. We are officers of the Reich. We fight until victory or death. There is no third option. Then we're choosing death, Brenner said simply, because victory isn't walking through that door. Vogel's hand moved to his holster, and for a terrible moment, Klaus thought the SS officer might actually shoot Brenner right there. But then a sound stopped everyone cold. A voice. Faint, distorted, but unmistakably speaking Russian. It was coming from above, filtering through cracks in the ceiling. The Red Army was directly overhead. Everyone quiet, Brenner whispered, raising his hand. They froze. 5 German soldiers holding their breath in a tomb of their own making. The Russian voices continued, laughing about something. One of them was singing. Klaus could hear boots walking across rubble, probably searching for survivors or valuables. Then came another sound, a mechanical grinding, growing louder. A tank. They're bringing armor through, Brenner whispered, probably clearing the street for their advance. The grinding grew louder, closer, until the entire bunker shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Coke let out a whimper of pain as the vibrations shifted the beam on his leg. The tank passed directly over them, its weight pressing down on their concrete coffin. And then, silence. They didn't detect us, Schultz breathed, relief flooding his young face. Of course they didn't, Vogel snapped. This bunker was designed to withstand bombardment. The Russians could park 1,000 tanks up there. The sound of metal scraping on concrete cut him off. Everyone's eyes went to the wall where the sound was coming from. Klaus approached slowly, his flashlight revealing a crack in the wall that hadn't been there before. And through that crack, impossibly, came a thin stream of cold air from outside. The tank shifted something, Brenner said, moving beside Klaus. Opened up a gap, but as Klaus leaned closer to examine the crack, his blood ran cold, because along with the fresh air came something else. A smell. Cordite, smoke, and something organic and terrible. The smell of a city dying. And then he heard it. A voice, speaking German, very close to the crack. Hello? Is someone down there? Klaus's heart leaped. Yes. We're trapped. Can you help us? How many of you? The voice was young, nervous. 5 of us, 1 wounded. Can you clear the entrance? A pause. Then, I don't know. Wait here. Where else would we go? Brenner muttered darkly. They waited. Minutes stretched like hours. Coke's breathing was becoming labored, shallow. He needed water, medical supplies, morphine. But their medical kit was somewhere under the rubble of the main entrance. He's not coming back, Vogel finally said. He's probably reporting our position to his Soviet masters. He spoke German. Exactly. A traitor. A collaborator. Vogel spat the words like curses. Berlin is full of them now. Cowards who think surrender will save them. But Klaus wasn't so sure. The voice had sounded genuine, concerned, not like someone about to betray fellow Germans to the enemy. Footsteps approached from outside. Multiple pairs. Stand back from the wall, the voice called down. We're going to try to widen the opening. The sound of metal tools on concrete began. Whoever was up there was actually trying to help. Klaus felt a surge of hope, quickly tempered by reality. Even if they widened the crack, It would take hours, maybe days, to create an opening large enough for a man to fit through. While they're distracted, Vogel whispered, gathering the others close, "We need to discuss our situation honestly." He pulled out a map from his coat, spreading it on an empty crate. By flashlight, Klaus could see it was a detailed layout of central Berlin, marked with defensive positions and bunker locations. "This is where we are," Vogel pointed. "The Führer bunker is here, 6 blocks north. Wehrmacht headquarters is 4 blocks east. If we can dig out, we can still..." "Still what?" Brenner interrupted. "Fight for another day. 2 days? The Red Army has 3 million men surrounding the city. We have maybe 50,000 defenders left, most of them old men and children. It's over, Herr Hauptsturmführer. We're just too proud to admit it." Vogel's jaw clenched. "I didn't survive 4 years of war to surrender in the final hour. And I didn't survive Stalingrad just to die pointlessly in a bunker." Brenner shot back. "There's a difference between dying with honor and dying for nothing. This is the Reich. The Reich is rubble," Brenner said flatly. "Look around you. This isn't a bunker. It's a preview of Germany's future. Buried, trapped, suffocating under the weight of its own mistakes." The slap came again, harder this time. But Brenner just smiled, blood on his teeth. "Hit me again, sir. It won't change reality." "Enough." Klaus stepped between them. "Fighting each other won't help. We need to focus on survival." "The boy is right." Koch groaned from his corner. His voice was weak, fading. "Save your strength for digging. The boy's right in land, for digging." Schultz, who had been silent through the argument, suddenly spoke up. "What if Feldwebel Brenner is right? What if the war really is over?" "Then we die as soldiers," Vogel said coldly, "not as prisoners." "But..." I said enough. The scraping sounds from above had stopped. The voice called down again. "The opening is wider now. Can you see daylight?" Klaus rushed to the crack. It was indeed wider, maybe 10 centimeters now. And through it, he could see a sliver of gray sky, choked with smoke. But more importantly, he could see a face. Young, maybe 20, wearing a Wehrmacht uniform that was torn and filthy. "Thank you," Klaus called up. "What's your name?" "Private Martin Fischer. I was separated from my unit during the bombardment. Listen, I need to tell you something important." "We're listening." Fischer's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "The Soviets are executing officers, especially SS. They're not taking prisoners anymore. Not after what they found in the camps. If you have any SS among you..." Klaus felt ice in his veins. He looked back at Vogel, whose death's head collar tabs identified him clearly as Waffen SS. "Why are you telling us this?" Klaus asked. "Because I'm tired of death," Fischer said simply. "I've seen enough. If there's a way to keep you alive, I'll take it. But you need to know what you're facing up here." Vogel had approached silently, listening. Now, he spoke, his voice carrying easily through the crack. "Private Fischer, this is Hauptsturmführer Vogel. I order you to report to the nearest Wehrmacht command post and request an immediate extraction team." A long silence. Then Fischer laughed. It was a broken, bitter sound. "Hauptsturmführer, there is no command post. There is no extraction team. There's barely a Wehrmacht anymore. There's just chaos and death and Russians. So many Russians." "Then you dig us out yourself," Vogel commanded. "That's an order." "I can't. The rubble here is meters deep. It would take a full engineering crew with proper equipment. I'm sorry, but..." A burst of Russian voices, close and sudden. Fischer's face disappeared from the crack. "Hide," they heard him hiss. "Don't make a sound." Klaus and the others pressed against the walls, barely breathing. Through the crack, they could see shadows moving. Russian soldiers, searching through the ruins. One of them called out to Fisher, asking something in Russian. Fisher answered in fluent Russian. Vogel's eyes narrowed dangerously. The Russians moved on. Fisher's face reappeared at the crack, but now Vogel was right there, his Luger drawn and pointed at the opening. "You speak Russian," Vogel said. It wasn't a question. "My mother was Russian," Fisher explained quickly. "I grew up in Moscow before my family moved to Berlin in 1932. I speak both languages. It's kept me alive." "You're a spy," Vogel interrupted. "A Soviet infiltrator." "No, I'm just a soldier trying to survive." "Hauptsturmführer," Klaus pleaded. "He was trying to help us." Was he? Or was he gathering information to report to his Soviet handlers? Vogel's finger tightened on the trigger. "Tell me, Private Fisher, what were you really doing down here?" Fisher's voice came back steady, resigned. "I was trying to help fellow Germans. But you know what? I'm done. I'm done with this insane war. Done with officers who'd rather see their men die than admit defeat. Done with all of it. You want to shoot me through this crack? Go ahead. At least it'll be quick." The sound of footsteps. Fisher was walking away. "Come back," Vogel shouted. "That's an order." But Fisher was gone. The bunker fell into heavy silence. Klaus looked at Vogel with barely concealed contempt. "You just drove away. Our only chance of rescue." He was a Soviet spy. He was a scared kid trying to help. Klaus's voice rose despite himself. "Just like all of us. Just like Schultz here, who should be in school, not in this tomb. Just like Koch, who's dying while we argue about loyalty to a regime that's already dead." Vogel's pistol swung toward Klaus. "Careful, Weber. Your words sound dangerously close to treason." "Then shoot me," Klaus said, surprising himself with his own courage. Or maybe it wasn't courage. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Exhaustion with the war, with the killing, with the lies they'd been fed for years. "Because I'd rather die quickly than slowly suffocate in here while you dream about defending a bunker that doesn't exist anymore." For a long moment, no one moved. Vogel's pistol remained pointed at Klaus's chest. Klaus could see the SS officer's finger on the trigger, could see the war raging behind those cold eyes. Was Vogel loyal enough to the Reich to kill his own men? Klaus was about to find out. But then Brenner spoke, his voice carrying the weight of age and experience. "Hauptsturmführer, if you shoot Weber, you'll have to shoot me too. And then Schultz. And then you'll be alone in this bunker with a dying man and no way out. Is that how you want to end your war?" The pistol wavered. Slowly, reluctantly, Vogel lowered it. "We'll wait," he said finally. "We'll conserve our air, ration our water, and wait for rescue." "And if rescue doesn't come?" Brenner asked. Vogel's smile was terrible. "Then we die as German soldiers. Together. April 29th, 1945. 3:17 a.m. Klaus Weber woke to the sound of Koch screaming. He dozed off despite himself, exhausted from the day's events and the thin air that was already becoming noticeable. But Koch's screams cut through the darkness like a knife, jolting all of them awake. "Make it stop. Please, God. Make it stop." Klaus scrambled to where Koch lay, his flashlight revealing a nightmare. The wounded man was thrashing, his broken leg moving in ways that made Klaus's stomach turn. The pain had finally become too much, breaking through whatever reserves of strength Koch had been using to stay quiet. "Hold him down!" Brenner was already there, his strong hands pinning Koch's shoulders. "Schultz, help me." The young private hesitated, his face pale in the flashlight beam. He'd probably never seen real suffering up close before. War had been abstract for him, orders to follow, positions to defend, enemies to fear. But this was something different. This was personal, intimate horror. "Schultz," Brenner snapped. "Now!" The boy moved, helping to hold Koch still. Klaus knelt by the wounded leg, examining it by flashlight. What he saw made him wish he hadn't looked. The compound fracture had worsened, bone fragments visible through torn flesh. Infection was setting in. He could smell it. A sickly sweet odor of decay. That meant blood poisoning wasn't far behind. "We need to immobilize it properly," Klaus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "And something for the pain." "Our medical supplies are buried with everything else," Vogel said from the shadows. He'd been sitting apart from the others, cleaning his Luger with methodical precision. "He'll have to endure." "He's dying," Klaus said bluntly. "Without morphine, without antibiotics, then he dies." "We're all going to die down here eventually, Weber. The only question is how long we can postpone it." Klaus wanted to hit him. Wanted to take that pristine Luger and shove it down the SS officer's throat. But instead, he turned back to Coke and did what he could. He found 2 pieces of broken wood and fashioned a splint using strips torn from his own shirt. Cock screamed through the whole process, his cries echoing off the concrete walls until Klaus thought he'd go mad from it. When it was finally done, Koch lay panting, his face slick with sweat despite the cold. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, Klaus." It was the first time Coke had used his first name. They'd been in the same unit for 2 months, but military formality had kept them distant. Now, facing death together, such formalities seemed absurd. "Rest now," Klaus told him. "Save your strength." But Koch's hand shot out, gripping Klaus's wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me. There's something you need to know about him." He gestured weakly toward Vogel. "He's not just SS. He's Gestapo. Internal security. I saw his papers once, before the collapse." Klaus felt his blood run cold. Gestapo, secret police, the men who investigated loyalty, who rooted out traitors, who made people disappear in the night. "Why are you telling me this?" Klaus whispered. "Because when things go bad, and they will go bad down here, he won't hesitate to kill any of us he deems a threat to security, or to his own survival." Coke's grip tightened. "Watch your back, Klaus. Watch all your backs." A sound made them both freeze. Footsteps. Vogel had risen and was walking toward them, his boots clicking ominously on the concrete. "Having a nice chat?" The SS officer's voice was pleasant, but his eyes were cold. "Just checking on his condition," Klaus said carefully. "How touching." Vogel crouched down, examining Coke with the clinical interest of a man studying an insect. "Tell me, Coke, how much pain are you in? On a scale of 1 to 10. 11. Coke gasped. "And if I told you I could end that pain right now, what would you say?" The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Klaus moved between them. "He just needs rest. He'll be fine once we get out of here." "Will he?" Vogel stood, his hand resting casually on his holster. "Or will he slow us down? Use up our precious air with his labored breathing? Consume water we can't spare?" "You're talking about murder," Klaus said flatly. "I'm talking about survival. There's a difference." Vogel turned to address the others. "I want everyone to understand our situation clearly. We have 5 men and limited resources. We must be pragmatic about our chances." Brenner had been listening silently, but now he spoke. "And what exactly do you propose, Hauptsturmführer?" "I propose we take inventory. Water, food, air, calculate how long we can survive down here, and make decisions accordingly." "Starting with killing the wounded man?" Brenner's voice was acid. "If necessary." The air seemed to thicken. Klaus could see Schultz backing away, his young face a mask of horror. This wasn't what he'd been told war would be. This wasn't glory or honor or defending the fatherland. This was something much darker. "Over my dead body," Klaus said quietly. Vogel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That can be arranged." Before anyone could react, the bunker shook. Not from an explosion, something different. A grinding, shifting sound. Like the earth itself was moving. Dust rained from the ceiling. The crack in the wall widened slightly, then stopped. "The ground is settling," Brenner said, his voice tight. "The bombardment must have destabilized the foundation." "Meaning?" Schultz asked, fear naked in his voice. "Meaning this whole structure could collapse at any moment." As if to punctuate his words, a section of ceiling in the far corner gave way with a crash. Concrete chunks the size of a man's head fell where Vogel had been sitting just minutes before. If he hadn't gotten up to threaten Koch, he'd be dead. They all stared at the rubble, understanding dawning. Their tomb was becoming unstable. "We need to shore up the ceiling," Brenner said, already moving. "Anything we can use as supports. Furniture, beams, anything." They worked in frantic silence, building makeshift pillars to support the sagging ceiling. Even Vogel helped, though Klaus noticed the SS officer kept his pistol within easy reach at all times. Koch, unable to move, watched with glazed eyes as they fought to keep their tomb from becoming their grave. After an hour of exhausting work, they'd done what they could. The ceiling still groaned ominously, but the supports would hold, for now. Klaus collapsed against the wall, his muscles screaming. He noticed Schultz sitting nearby, shaking. The boy was crying silently, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "First time?" Klaus asked gently. Schultz nodded. I thought war would be different. The posters showed us soldiers standing proud, defending the Reich. Not this. Not dying in the dark like rats." "The posters lied," Klaus said. "They always do. My mother didn't want me to enlist. She said the war was already lost, that I'd die for nothing. I called her a traitor." Schultz's voice broke. "God, I called my own mother a traitor." Klaus had no comfort to offer. What could he say? That it would be okay? That they'd survive? He'd be lying, and they both knew it. "Tell me about her," Klaus said instead. "Your mother." And so Schultz talked about his mother's bakery in Bavaria, about the smell of fresh bread on Sunday mornings, about how she'd sing while she kneaded dough. Simple memories, precious memories, from a world that seemed impossibly far away now. Brenner joined them, listening in silence. Even Vogel, checking their water supplies in the corner, seemed to pause in his work. "She makes this cake," Schultz was saying, his voice stronger now, animated by memory. "Chocolate with cherries. Every year for my birthday. I'd give anything to taste it again." "You will," Klaus lied, "when we get out of here." But Schultz wasn't fooled. "Don't, Klaus. Don't give me false hope. I'd rather face it honestly." The boy had grown up, Klaus realized. In these few hours underground, Schultz had aged years. War did that compressed time, forced boys to become men before they were ready. A sound from outside made them all freeze. Voices again, speaking German this time. Multiple voices, and the rumble of machinery. Klaus rushed to the crack in the wall. Through it, he could see lights, flashlights, sweeping through the rubble. "Hello?" he called out. "Is someone there?" The lights swung toward his voice. A face appeared at the crack, not Fischer this time, but an older man, maybe 50, wearing a Wehrmacht uniform with sergeant's insignia. "How many of you?" the sergeant asked. 5. 1. Critically wounded. Can you get us out?" The sergeant examined the rubble, his expression grim. "Maybe. We have some equipment crowbars, shovels. But I need to be honest with you. The Soviets control this sector now. They're executing SS officers on sight, if you have any among you." Klaus felt Vogel's presence behind him before he spoke. "Hauptsturmführer Heinrich Vogel, Waffen SS," Vogel announced. "I'm the ranking officer here, and I order you to extract us immediately." The sergeant's face hardened. "I don't take orders from SS anymore. The war is over, Hauptsturmführer. Berlin has fallen. The Führer is dead." "Lies!" Vogel shouted. "Soviet propaganda." I saw his body myself, the sergeant said quietly. Burned in the garden of the Reich Chancellery. He killed himself 2 days ago, rather than face capture. It's over. The silence in the bunker was absolute. Klaus felt the weight of those words, crushing him. Hitler, dead. The war over. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd suffered, all of it for nothing. Vogel's reaction was immediate and violent. He grabbed Klaus, yanking him away from the crack, and thrust his Luger through the opening. "You're a liar and a defeatist," Vogel screamed, firing blindly through the crack. The shot echoed deafeningly in the confined space. Outside, men shouted and scattered. Return fire came through the crack, bullets ricocheting off concrete. Everyone dove for cover. When the shooting stopped, Vogel was laughing, a high, brittle sound that spoke of a mind breaking under pressure. "You see, the Reich still has teeth. We're not defeated." "You just shot at our rescuers, you madman," Brenner roared, starting toward Vogel. The Luger swung toward him. "Stay back, Feldwebel, or you'll join Koch in his suffering." "Do it," Brenner said, his voice deadly calm. "Pull that trigger, because if you don't, I'm going to take that pistol and beat you to death with it." They faced each other across the bunker. Two soldiers from different eras of German military tradition. Brenner, the old-school Wehrmacht sergeant, who'd learned war in the trenches of the Eastern Front. Vogel, the ideological fanatic who'd learned politics in the halls of SS headquarters. "Gentlemen, please," Klaus tried. "We need to—" "Shut up, Weber," Vogel snapped. "You're all weak. All of you. I should have seen it earlier. Defeatists and cowards. Every one of you. We're realists," Brenner said. "There's a difference." "There is no difference. Either you believe in final victory or you're a traitor to the Reich." "The Reich is dead," Brenner shouted. "Can't you understand that? It's over. We lost." The Luger barked once. Brenner staggered, clutching his shoulder. Blood welled between his fingers. For a moment, no one moved. Then Klaus was in motion, catching Brenner before he fell. The wound was clean, through and through, missing the bone. But in their situation, any wound could be fatal. "You shot him," Schultz whispered, his voice small and disbelieving. "You shot our own sergeant." "I shot a defeatist," Vogel corrected. "And I'll shoot anyone else who speaks treason in my presence." He was insane, Klaus realized. The stress, the confinement, the news of Hitler's death. Something had snapped in Vogel's mind. The SS officer had retreated into ideology, into denial, into the only reality he could accept. "Hauptsturmführer," Klaus said carefully, helping Brenner sit against the wall. "We need to think clearly. We're trapped, running out of air, with wounded men. Fighting each other serves no purpose." "Fighting?" Vogel laughed again. "This isn't fighting, Weber. This is maintaining discipline. Without discipline, without order, we're no better than animals." "We're already animals," Koch groaned from his corner. "Animals in a cage, waiting to die." "Shut up," Vogel snapped. "Why?" Koch's voice grew stronger, fueled by pain and rage. "What are you going to do, shoot me too? Go ahead. I'm dead anyway. Might as well make it quick." Vogel's face contorted. He aimed the Luger at Koch. Klaus saw his finger tightening on the trigger. "Stop!" Klaus threw himself in front of Koch. "This is insane. We're Germans, brothers in arms." "Move aside, Weber." "No, that's an order. Then court-martial me. After we get out of here. If we get out of here." Klaus stood his ground, his heart hammering. "But I won't let you murder a wounded man." For a long moment, Vogel stared at him. Klaus could see the calculations running behind those cold eyes. Could see Vogel weighing whether killing Klaus would be worth the ammunition, worth the effort. Then, incredibly, Vogel lowered the pistol. "Fine. Let him suffer. Let him use up our air with his pathetic whimpering. When we're all suffocating, you can explain to him why his life was worth more than ours." Vogel turned away, retreating to the far corner of the bunker. He sat with his back to the wall, Luger in his lap, staring at nothing. Klaus helped Brenner bandage his shoulder with torn strips of uniform. The old sergeant was pale but steady. "Thank you," Brenner whispered, "for standing up to him. Someone had to. He's gonna kill us all, you know. If we don't get out of here soon, one by one, he'll decide we're threats and put bullets in us." Klaus knew Brenner was right. Vogel was a bomb waiting to explode, and they were all trapped in the blast radius. "Then we need to get that gun away from him," Klaus said quietly. "How? He's paranoid. He's watching us constantly." "I don't know yet, but we'll figure something out." Outside, they could hear the sounds of the city dying. Explosions, gunfire, screams. The Red Army was consolidating its control of Berlin, block by bloody block. And they were here, trapped underground, with a madman who thought he could still win a war that was already lost. Klaus checked his watch. They'd been trapped for 16 hours. The air was noticeably thinner already. At this rate, they had maybe 2 days before carbon dioxide levels reached lethal concentration. 2 days. 48 hours. It might as well have been eternity. Koch was unconscious again, his breathing shallow and labored. Brenner sat with his eyes closed, conserving energy. Schultz was curled up in a corner, shaking. And Vogel kept watch over them all like a spider in its web, waiting for any sign of betrayal. Klaus closed his eyes. He thought of his wife Anna, safe in her sister's village in the countryside. They'd married just 3 months before he'd been drafted. 3 months of happiness before the war had swallowed him. If he died down here, would she ever know what happened? Or would he just disappear? Another name on an endless list of missing soldiers. A sound made him look up. The crack in the wall was glowing. No, something was being pushed through. A piece of paper, wrapped around a small bottle. Klaus retrieved it carefully, unfolding the note. It was from the sergeant outside. "I can't extract you with him shooting at us, but here's water and morphine for your wounded. If you can neutralize the SS officer, signal us by knocking 3 times. We'll get you out. You have my word, as a soldier. Feldwebel Grau." Klaus looked at the bottle of morphine, then at Koch's suffering form, then at Vogel, still watching them with those dead eyes. A choice was forming, a terrible choice that Klaus knew he'd have to make soon. But not yet. Not just yet. He pocketed the note and the morphine, told no one. Let them rest. Let them have a few more hours of hope before the darkness closed in completely. Because Klaus knew the truth now. The only way any of them were getting out of here alive was if Vogel didn't. And that meant murder. Klaus administered the morphine to Koch when Vogel dozed off, his back against the wall, the Luger still gripped in his hand. The wounded man's breathing eased, his face relaxing for the first time in hours. But Klaus knew it was only delaying the inevitable. Without proper medical care, infection would kill Koch within days. He showed Brenner the note from Feldwebel Grau. The old sergeant read it by flashlight, his face impassive. "So," Brenner whispered, "we murder an SS officer to save ourselves." "It's not murder," Klaus said, though the words tasted like ash. "It's survival." "There's a difference?" Klaus had no answer. 6 months ago, he'd been a baker in Stuttgart. His biggest concern had been perfecting his rye bread recipe. Now he was contemplating killing a fellow German soldier. The war had turned them all into something unrecognizable. "How?" Brenner asked. "He's armed, paranoid, and watching us constantly." Klaus looked around the bunker, taking inventory. They had rubble, broken furniture, tools from the collapsed storage area. And they had something else, Vogel's arrogance. The SS officer still thought he was in control, that his rank and ideology made him invincible. "We wait for him to sleep," Klaus said. "Really sleep, not just doze. Then we rush him. And if he wakes up, then we better move fast." Schultz had been listening from his corner. Now he crawled over, his young face etched with conflict. I can't do this. I can't kill a German officer. He's going to kill us, Brenner said flatly. All of us, one by one, as his sanity continues to slip. Coke first, because he's wounded. Then me, because I questioned him. Then you and Weber, because we're witnesses. He'll be the last one standing, convinced he defended the right to the bitter end. But there is no but. Boy, Brenner cut him off. This is the choice war gives you. Kill or be killed. It doesn't matter if it's a Russian or your own officer. Dead is dead. Schultz looked at Klaus with pleading eyes, wanting absolution, wanting to be told there was another way. Klaus couldn't give him either. I won't force you, Klaus said quietly, but if you're not with us, stay out of our way. The hours crawled by. The air grew thicker, more oppressive. Koch drifted in and out of consciousness, the morphine keeping the worst of the pain at bay. Brenner dozed fitfully, his wounded shoulder causing him to shift and grimace. And Vogel sat like a statue, his eyes occasionally closing for a few seconds before snapping open again. Around 2 in the afternoon, Klaus checked his watch obsessively. Needing to anchor himself to something concrete, they heard new sounds from above. Heavy machinery. Russian voices, shouting orders. Klaus approached the crack carefully. Through it, he could see Soviet soldiers setting up what looked like a field headquarters in the ruins. Trucks were arriving, disgorging troops and equipment. The Red Army was here to stay. What are they doing? Vogel had materialized beside him, silent as a ghost. Klaus's heart hammered, but he kept his voice steady. Setting up camp, they've secured the sector. Then they're vulnerable. Concentrated in one area. Vogel's eyes gleamed with a fanatic light. If we could break out, we could call in artillery. Catch them all. With what artillery? Klaus couldn't help himself. The Wehrmacht is destroyed. Berlin is surrounded. There are no reinforcements coming. Vogel's hand moved to his Luger, but Klaus didn't flinch. He was tired of living in fear of this madman. You're testing my patience, Weber. And you're testing reality, Hauptsturmführer. But reality doesn't care about your ideology or your loyalty. Reality is that we're trapped, running out of air, with no way out except through those Soviet soldiers. Then we die fighting. Or we surrender and live. The Luger came up, pressing against Klaus's forehead. The metal was cold, almost soothing in the stifling heat of the bunker. Say that again, Vogel whispered. Say the word surrender one more time. Klaus met his eyes, saw the madness swimming there, and felt a strange calm descend. He was done being afraid. Done playing games with a lunatic while good men died around them. Surrender, Klaus said clearly. Capitulation, yielding to superior force. Call it what you want, but it's the only way any of us see daylight again. Vogel's finger tightened on the trigger. Klaus could see the tendons in his hand, the slight tremor that meant the SS officer was maybe a gram of pressure away from painting the wall with Klaus's brains. Hauptsturmführer, Brenner's voice cut through the tension. If you shoot Weber, you'll have to shoot me too. And then the boy. And you'll be alone with a dying man, no way out, and air that's running out. Is that how the glorious SS ends? Suffocating alone in the dark? The Luger wavered. Vogel's face contorted with rage, and something else fear. Because Brenner was right, and somewhere in his fractured mind, Vogel knew it. You're all traitors, Vogel said. But the words lacked conviction. All of you. The Reich deserved better soldiers. The Reich got exactly the soldiers it deserved, Brenner said. Men who were lied to, manipulated, and sent to die for the ambitions of madmen. We're just the ones unlucky enough to realize it before the end. Vogel lowered the pistol slowly. He looked around the bunker at Koch unconscious in the corner, at Schultz huddled against the wall, at Brenner with his blood-stained shoulder, at Klaus still standing defiant before him. And something in the SS officer seemed to break. Fine, he said softly. Fine. We'll wait. We'll conserve our air and wait for whatever comes. He retreated to his corner, but this time he didn't sit down. He paced, muttering to himself. the Luger dangling from his hand. Klaus exchanged glances with Brenner. The old sergeant nodded slightly. Tonight. They'd make their move tonight. But Vogel surprised them all. Around 6 in the evening, by Klaus's watch, the SS officer stopped pacing. He stood in the center of the bunker, under the flickering light of their last functioning flashlight, and began to speak. "I want to tell you all something," Vogel said. His voice was different now, quieter, almost human, about why I joined the SS. No one responded. They just watched him, waiting. I was 16 when the party came to power. My father was a shopkeeper in Munich, a weak man who let everyone walk over him. When the SA came demanding donations, he paid. When they came back demanding more, he paid again. He died, a broken man, poor, and humiliated. Vogel looked at his hands, at the Luger gripped there. I swore I'd never be weak like him. I joined the Hitler Youth, then the SS. I believed God. I believed so completely that we were building something pure, something strong, that Germany would rise from the ashes of Versailles and become great again. And what did you do for that belief? Brenner asked, his voice hard. What orders did you follow? Vogel's eyes snapped up. What I had to. What Germany required. The camps? Brenner pressed. The executions? I did my duty. Vogel's voice rose, defensive. I followed orders. What was I supposed to do? Refuse? Be shot as a traitor? Yes, Brenner said simply. That's exactly what you should have done. The silence that followed was crushing. Vogel stared at Brenner, then at Klaus, then at Schultz, looking for understanding, for absolution, for anything to justify what he'd done in the name of the Reich. He found nothing. You don't understand, Vogel said, and now his voice was breaking. None of you understand. If we lose, if Germany falls, then what was it all for? All the sacrifice, all the blood it has to mean something. It means nothing, Klaus said. Not cruelly, just stating a fact. It never meant anything. We were lied to from the beginning. Vogel's face crumpled. The facade of the proud SS officer, the ideological warrior, the true believer, it all shattered in an instant. What was left was just a man, maybe 30 years old, who'd given everything to a cause that was now ash. Then I have nothing, Vogel whispered. I am nothing. He raised the Luger. For a terrible moment, Klaus thought Vogel was going to shoot him. But instead, the SS officer pressed the barrel under his own chin. Wait. Klaus started forward. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Vogel's body crumpled. The Luger clattering from his lifeless hand. Blood and brain matter spattered the concrete wall, behind where he'd been standing. The smell of cordite mixed with the already foul air. Schultz vomited in the corner. Brenner just stared, his face expressionless, and Klaus stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. The problem had solved itself, but Klaus felt no relief, no triumph, just a hollow emptiness as he looked at Vogel's body, another casualty of a war that had already ended. We need to signal Feldwebel Grau, Brenner said finally, his voice mechanical, before the Soviets hear the shot and investigate. Klaus moved to the crack in the wall and knocked 3 times, then 3 times again, and a 3rd time, just to be sure. A face appeared at the opening. Grau, the Wehrmacht sergeant from before. His eyes widened as he took in the scene visible through the crack. The SS officer? He asked. Dead, Klaus said. We need extraction. Now. We have wounded men who won't survive much longer. Grau nodded. Give us 2 hours. We need to move the machinery into position without attracting Soviet attention. Can you hold out that long? Klaus looked back at the bunker. Koch was barely breathing, his face gray. Brenner was pale from blood loss. Schultz was curled in a ball, traumatized. And Vogel's body lay in a spreading pool of blood. We don't have a choice, Klaus said. 2 hours, Grau promised. Stay alive. The face disappeared. Klaus slumped against the wall, his legs suddenly unable to support him. Around him, the bunker seemed to close in, the walls pressing inward, the ceiling sagging lower. "Klaus?" Schultz's voice was small, childlike. "Are we going to make it?" Klaus wanted to say yes, wanted to give the boy hope, something to hold on to. But he was done lying. "I don't know," Klaus said, "but we're going to try." Brenner struggled to his feet, moving to check Koch's pulse. After a moment, he looked up and shook his head. "He's gone. Must have been while we were distracted." So that was 4 now. 2 dead, 3 alive. Not great odds, but better than it had been an hour ago. Klaus moved to close Koch's eyes. The man deserved that much dignity, at least. As he did, he noticed Koch's hand was clutching something. A photograph, creased and worn from being carried in a pocket. Klaus gently pried it free. It was a picture of a woman and 2 children, smiling at the camera. Koch's family, presumably. People who would never know exactly how their husband and father had died, or that his last hours had been agony in a dark hole beneath a dying city. Klaus pocketed the photograph. If they got out, when they got out, he'd find Koch's family and give it to them. It was the least he could do. The 2 hours stretched into eternity. They didn't speak much. What was there to say? They'd survived, but at what cost? Their humanity? Their souls? Klaus wasn't sure he knew anymore. Finally, they heard it. The sound of machinery outside. The grunt of men straining against rubble. Grau's voice calling through the crack. "Stand back! We're breaking through!" Klaus, Brenner, and Schultz moved to the far corner of the bunker. The sound of jackhammers filled the air, impossibly loud after hours of relative silence. Dust filled the bunker, making it even harder to breathe. And then light. Real light. Not the yellow glow of dying flashlights, but actual daylight. Gray and smoke-filtered but beautiful, beyond words. A hole appeared in the rubble, widening as German soldiers worked frantically to clear it. "Come on," Grau called. "One at a time. You first, boy." Schultz didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled through the opening, helped by hands reaching in to pull him to safety. Then Brenner, grimacing as his wounded shoulders scraped against the rough edges. Finally, Klaus. He took one last look at the bunker, at Vogel's body, at Koch lying still and cold, at the place that had very nearly become their tomb. Then he climbed through into the light. The world above was a nightmare. Berlin was unrecognizable buildings reduced to rubble, streets cratered by artillery, smoke hanging over everything like a funeral shroud. Soviet soldiers were everywhere, their distinctive helmets and PPS submachine guns marking them as the new masters of the city. "This way," Grau hissed, leading them quickly through the ruins. "We need to get you to the collection point before the Ivans realize you're Wehrmacht." They moved through a landscape of devastation, past bodies that no one had bothered to collect, past burned-out tanks and shattered buildings. Klaus saw Soviet soldiers looting abandoned shops, German civilians picking through rubble for anything salvageable, and everywhere the smell of death and destruction. Grau led them to a partially intact building where dozens of German soldiers had gathered the survivors, the defeated, the ones who'd lived to see their nations collapse. They wore Wehrmacht uniforms, Volkssturm armbands, even a few Luftwaffe pilots whose planes had long since been grounded. No SS. Vogel would have been the only one, Klaus realized. And he'd chosen death rather than capture. "Registration is that way," Grau said, pointing to where Soviet soldiers were processing prisoners. "They'll take you to a holding camp, probably. After that," he shrugged. "Who knows? Siberia, maybe? Labor camps? But you'll be alive." "Thank you," Klaus said, "for getting us out." Grau looked at him for a long moment. "I lost my son in Stalingrad, my daughter in an air raid. My wife hanged herself when she heard. You know what I have left? Nothing. So when I can save a few lives, instead of taking them, I do it. It's all that keeps me sane." He walked away, before Klaus could respond. The Soviet registration process was efficient and impersonal. They searched him thoroughly, confiscating his watch, his wedding ring, even Koch's family photograph. When Klaus protested about the photo, a Russian soldier just laughed and pocketed it. They were herded into a courtyard with hundreds of other prisoners. Schultz stayed close to Klaus, looking lost and terrified. Brenner sat against a wall, his face gray with pain and exhaustion. "What happens now?" Schultz asked. "Now we survive," Klaus said. "One day at a time. That's all we can do. But the war is over. We lost. What's the point?" Klaus looked at the boy because that's all he was, really. Just a boy wearing a man's uniform. "The point is that we're alive. Your mother is waiting for you in Bavaria. My wife is waiting for me. That's enough of a point." "Is it?" Schultz's eyes were haunted. "After everything we've done? Everything we've seen?" Klaus had no answer, because he wasn't sure himself. They'd survived the bunker, survived the collapse of Berlin, survived the end of the war. But had they really survived? Or were they just ghosts, walking and talking but already dead inside? A Soviet officer appeared, flanked by soldiers with machine guns. He began reading names from a list in heavily accented German. "These men, step forward. You are being transferred." Klaus's name was called. So was Brenner's. But not Schultz. Klaus gripped the boy's shoulder. "Stay strong. Find your mother. Tell her you survived. That's an order." Schultz nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, Klaus, for everything." Then Soviet soldiers were separating them, pushing Klaus and Brenner toward a waiting truck with dozens of other prisoners. Klaus looked back once, saw Schultz standing alone in the courtyard, and prayed the boy would make it home. The truck rolled through the ruins of Berlin, heading east, toward an uncertain future, toward prison camps and forced labor, and maybe, eventually, freedom, or maybe death. Klaus had stopped trying to predict what came next. Beside him, Brenner spoke quietly. "Do you think we'll ever see home again?" Klaus thought of Anna, of their small apartment in Stuttgart, of the bakery where he'd spent his mornings covered in flour and content. It seemed like another life, another world. "I don't know," Klaus admitted, "but I'm going to try. We survived that bunker. We can survive anything." Brenner smiled slightly. "You know, down there, I thought you were just another scared soldier. But you've got steel in you, Weber. You'll make it home. I'm sure of it." "What about you? Me?" Brenner looked out at the destroyed city rolling past. "I'm an old man who's seen too much. I think maybe I died in Stalingrad and just haven't realized it yet. But you, Schultz, the others, you've got reasons to survive. Hold on to that." The truck drove on through the twilight. Behind them, Berlin burned. Ahead, the unknown waited. Klaus closed his eyes and thought of Anna, of the promise he'd made to come home, of the life they'd build together when this nightmare finally ended. If it ever ended. 3 days. Klaus had been in the back of the Soviet transport truck for 3 days, packed in with 40 other German prisoners. They'd been given water twice and thin soup once. Men had died. Klaus counted 5 bodies that had been unceremoniously dumped at the roadside when the truck stopped. Brenner was fading. The old sergeant's shoulder wound had become infected, fever making him delirious. He alternated between lucidity and rambling about Stalingrad, about frozen corpses and endless snow. "They look like statues," Brenner muttered, his eyes unfocused. "The dead Russians, frozen in the positions they died in, like a museum of horror." "Save your strength," Klaus urged, but Brenner wasn't hearing him anymore. "We ate the horses first. Then, the leather of our boots. Some men ate worse things. But we don't talk about that. We never talk about that." Klaus held him as the truck bounced over bombed-out roads. Around them, the other prisoners sat in numb silence. Most were Wehrmacht, like Klaus, regular soldiers who'd been drafted and done what they were told. A few were Volkssturm, old men and boys who'd been given rifles and told to defend the Reich in its final hours. One of them, a boy who couldn't have been more than 15, kept asking the same question. When do we go home? They said if we surrendered, we could go home. No one had the heart to tell him the truth, that they weren't going home, that the Soviet Union had millions of men to rebuild after the war's devastation, and German prisoners were free labor, that some of them would never see Germany again. The truck finally stopped at what looked like a former factory. Soviet soldiers opened the back, shouting orders in Russian. Klaus helped Brenner down, the old sergeant barely able to stand. They were herded into a massive warehouse where thousands of prisoners were already gathered. The smell was overwhelming unwashed bodies, human waste, disease. Klaus spotted groups organized by unit, by city of origin, by nothing at all except the arbitrary need for human beings to form tribes even in hell. Typhus, a voice said beside Klaus. He turned to see a German doctor, or someone who'd been a doctor once. The man's uniform was filthy, his face gaunt. It's spreading through the camp. Without medicine, without sanitation, we're losing 10 men a day. What can we do? Klaus asked. Die slower, the doctor said bleakly. That's the best we can manage. Klaus found a corner for Brenner to rest, using his own body as a pillow. The old sergeant's breathing was labored, rattling in his chest. Klaus, Brenner whispered, I need to tell you something. Rest. Save your energy. No. Brenner gripped his arm with surprising strength. Listen, Vogel. He was right about one thing. We did terrible things. Not just the SS. All of us. Things we can't take back. You were a soldier. I was a murderer, Brenner interrupted. We all were. We just wore uniforms and called it duty. But the dead don't care about uniforms, Klaus. They're just as dead whether we killed them honorably or not. What are you saying? Brenner's eyes focused on Klaus with sudden intensity. I'm saying that if you make it home, when you make it home, you carry our guilt with you. You tell them what we did. Not the propaganda version, not the hero's tale. The truth. Can you do that? Klaus thought about all the things he'd seen, the orders he'd followed without question, the times he'd looked away when he should have spoken up. He thought about the camps the Allies were discovering, about the stories already spreading among the prisoners, about what the SS had done in the East. Yes, Klaus said quietly. I'll tell them. Brenner smiled, satisfied. Good. That's good. His grip loosened. I'm tired, Klaus. So tired. Then sleep. I'll watch over you. But Brenner was already slipping away. His breathing grew shallow, then stopped. Just like that, without drama or final words, Ernst Brenner died, another casualty of a war that had officially ended days ago. Klaus sat with the body for hours, unable to move, unable to process. He'd known Brenner for less than a week, but in the intensity of the bunker, in the shared trauma of survival, they'd become something more than comrades. Brothers, maybe. Or just two men clinging to each other in the darkness. Eventually, Soviet guards came through, collecting the dead. They pulled Brenner's body away without ceremony, adding it to a cart already piled with corpses. Klaus watched them go, feeling hollowed out, empty. First time? Someone asked. Klaus turned to see a man in his 30s, wearing a Wehrmacht captain's uniform. His name tag read, Steiner. First time watching someone die? No, Klaus said. I've seen plenty of death. But this, he survived so much. Stalingrad, the Eastern Front, everything. To die now, after the war's over. The war isn't over for us, Steiner said. It's just entering a new phase. He gestured around the warehouse. Welcome to the Gulag, Weber. This is your life now. Over the following days, Klaus learned the rhythms of camp life. Wake before dawn to thin soup, and a chunk of black bread. Work detail hauling rubble, repairing rail lines, whatever the Soviets needed. Return to the warehouse at dusk for more watery soup. Sleep on the concrete floor, crowded in with hundreds of other men, trying to ignore the sounds of crying, praying, dying. Men adapted in different ways. Some formed tight groups, protecting each other from thieves and informers. Some turned inward, becoming shells that went through the motions but had already given up inside. Some collaborated with the guards, became prisoner trustees in exchange for better food and treatment. And some died. Every day, the death cart came through. Klaus survived by shutting down the part of himself that felt too much. He worked mechanically, ate his rations without tasting them, slept when exhausted. He thought about Anna occasionally, but even those thoughts became abstract, like remembering a book he'd once read rather than the woman he'd promised to grow old with. 1 month passed. Then 2. Summer came, turning the warehouse into an oven. Then fall, bringing cold that seeped through their thin uniforms. In September, a new group of prisoners arrived. Germans captured further east as the Soviets consolidated their control of occupied territories. Among them was a face Klaus recognized. Schultz? The boy turned, except he wasn't a boy anymore. Something had happened in the months since Berlin. Schultz's face had hardened, aged beyond his years. His eyes were empty. Weber, Schultz said flatly. You're still alive. So are you, I thought. I got transferred. Different camp, different hell. Same shit. Schultz's language was coarser now. Crude. The polite boy who'd talked about his mother's bakery was gone. They stood awkwardly. 2 survivors who'd once shared a death trap now reunited in a larger one. Brenner? Dead. First week here. Schultz nodded, unsurprised. Most of the men from Berlin are dead. Disease, starvation, beatings. The Soviets don't care if we live or die. We're just slave labor until we drop. What happened to you? Klaus asked. You seem different. Schultz's laugh was bitter. I grew up, Weber. Learned how the world really works. Want to know the secret to surviving these camps? He leaned close. You become something less than human. You take whatever you need from whoever's weaker. You inform on your fellow prisoners if it means extra bread. You stop being German, stop being a person, and just become an animal that wants to live another day. Klaus stared at him, horrified. That's not survival. It's reality. Schultz interrupted. You can judge me if you want, but I'm alive. And most of the men who held on to their morals and their dignity are dead. He walked away before Klaus could respond. That night, Klaus couldn't sleep. He thought about Schultz's words, about Brenner's confession in the bunker, about Vogel choosing death rather than surrender. Different responses to the same impossible situation. Who was right? Who was wrong? Or were such categories meaningless now? In October, rumors began spreading through the camp. Germany was being divided, occupied by the Allies in the West, the Soviets in the East. Some prisoners would be repatriated, others held indefinitely. No one knew which category they'd fall into. Klaus allowed himself to hope. Maybe he'd be released. Maybe he'd find his way back to Anna, to Stuttgart, to the life he'd left behind. But hope was dangerous in the camps. Hope made men vulnerable, gave them something to lose. Klaus had seen men receive letters saying they'd be released soon, only to die from disease days before transport. He'd seen men so consumed by hope that they couldn't function, couldn't work, couldn't survive the present because they were so focused on an imaginary future. So Klaus pushed hope down, buried it deep where it couldn't hurt him. Winter came. Men died faster, now pneumonia, frostbite, simple exhaustion. The death cart was full every morning. Klaus kept working, kept surviving. He no longer thought about why. Survival had become its own purpose, its own end. He was a machine that woke, worked, ate, slept, nothing more. In December, almost 8 months after Berlin's fall, Klaus's name was called during evening roll call. His heart hammered. Being singled out was never good. Either you were being sent to a worse camp or being held for additional questioning, which usually meant torture, as the Soviets searched for war criminals. But instead, Klaus found himself in an administrative building, facing a Soviet officer who spoke decent German. Weber Klaus, baker from Stuttgart, drafted 1944. No party membership, no SS affiliation. Combat service, minimal. Political reliability, questionable, but no evidence of war crimes. The officer looked up. You're being released. Klaus couldn't process the words. Released? Return to the British occupation zone. There's a transport leaving tomorrow for the West. You'll be on it. Why me? The officer shrugged. Orders. Maybe they need bakers in the West. Maybe your file fell to the right person's desk. Does it matter? It didn't. Klaus didn't question his good fortune. He just nodded, accepted the papers he was given, and walked out in a daze. That night, he found Schultz and told him. The younger man's face showed nothing. Good for you. Come with me. Maybe I'm not on the list, Weber. And I've done things. Well, things they'll find out about if they look too closely. I'm staying here. Weber. Schultz. Hans, the younger man interrupted. My name is Hans. Use it at least once before you leave. Hans. 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 Hans, Klaus said softly. Thank you for surviving, for making it this far. Don't thank me, Hans Schultz said. Just go home. Live for both of us. And maybe, his voice cracked slightly, maybe visit my mother. Tell her I tried. Tell her I'm sorry I called her a traitor. Can you do that? I will. I promise. They didn't shake hands. Didn't embrace. They just looked at each other for a long moment. Two men who'd shared a bunker in hell and survived, barely, to see daylight again. Then Klaus walked away. Stuttgart, Germany, British occupation zone. December 24th, 1945. The train pulled into Stuttgart station just as the sun was setting. Klaus stepped onto the platform with a dozen other repatriated prisoners, carrying nothing but the clothes on his back and the papers that identified him as a released POW. The city was damaged, but not destroyed like Berlin. Here, buildings still stood. People still walked the streets with purpose. Shops were open. Life continued. Klaus walked through streets he'd known all his life, now strange and familiar at once. Past the bakery where he'd worked, boarded up now. Probably the owner dead or fled. Past the church where he'd married Anna. One wall collapsed from bombing, but the steeple still stood. And finally, to the apartment building where they'd lived, where, maybe, she still lived, if she'd returned from her sister's village. He climbed the stairs slowly, his heart hammering. What if she wasn't there? What if she'd moved on, assumed him dead, remarried? What if she was there but didn't recognize him gaunt, scarred, aged beyond his years? He knocked on the door, waited. Heard footsteps inside. The door opened. Anna stood there, flour dusting her hand she'd been baking, just like he used to. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Klaus saw himself reflected in her eyes, a ghost, a skeleton wearing her husband's face. Klaus, she whispered. I came home, he said. His voice cracked. I promised I'd come home. She pulled him inside, held him as he finally broke down. All the death, all the horror, all the months of shutting down his emotions just to survive it all came flooding out. He sobbed against her shoulder like a child while she held him and whispered that he was safe now, that he was home, that it was over. But it wasn't over. It would never be over. Klaus would carry the bunker with him, forever carry Vogel's suicide, Koch's suffering, Brenner's confession, Schultz's transformation into something inhuman. carry the guilt of being one of the lucky ones who made it home when so many hadn't. That night, lying beside Anna in their bed, unable to sleep, Klaus thought about Brenner's dying words, about telling the truth, about carrying the guilt for those who didn't survive. He would do it. He would bear witness. But not tonight. Tonight he just wanted to lie beside his wife and pretend for a few hours that the world was good again. Outside, church bells rang for Christmas. In the ruins of Berlin, men were still dying in camps. In Stuttgart, Klaus Weber closed his eyes and tried to believe in redemption. He wasn't sure he'd ever succeed, but he would try. For Brenner, for Koch, for the boy Hans Schultz had been before the war broke him. He would try to be human again, even if he'd forgotten how.